Live challenge. Yay! Now I've connected on both YouTube and Facebook Live. This is a new experience. I'm trying a different secondary platform. I used to stream also on IGTV. Um, I still think you get a better view, that the best view is found on YouTube, but at least on Facebook Live, I can set it up with the landscape. So we're going to be talking about hats that I'm designing, of which I'm wearing one right now, as part of the Phantom 35 Challenge, co-sponsored by my friends at JWH Millinery. And we came up with this challenge because 2021 is the 35th anniversary of the opening in London's West End of the Andrew Lloyd Webber, is it Andrew Lloyd Webber? Yes, musical, Phantom of the Opera. And we wanted to create a creative challenge around that. And the gist of it is you can be inspired by not only the musical, but also the Gaston Leroux novel that predates it, or any cinematic adaptation of that novel. Take inspiration from that for creating artwork, which in this case, it's for me and for John at JWH. Uh, it's hats. I think that it would be wonderful if people would also get involved creating cosplay elements, paintings, music, even whatever. But so that's what I'm working on, and in struggling with what I was going to make, millinery wise, that would be inspired by that musical. Um, Something that came to mind, partly because I had some extra credit with Spoonflower, the digital fabric printers, but also partly because there's loads of textile artists on there who have created all kinds of print designs. And I thought surely there would be some cool ones that pertained to opera in general, or Phantom of the Opera in specific. And so this hat that I'm going to talk about today, and I'm also working on a second version of it in a second print of fabric. This hat, partly I wanted the structure to be simple because if, let's see, is this pinned on here? No, it's not. If you can look at this fabric, it is printed with Art Nouveau not movie posters, opera posters from operas, and I think some of them are famous artists like Toulouse-Lautrec, I believe, I'm blanking on the name, Alphonse Mucha. Anyway, so there are a lot of visual interest going on with this printed fabric, and so I wanted the structure of the hat to be fairly simple to showcase that print. And I also had been reading and was interested in hats of the 30s and 40s, which, if you've been watching this stream, or if you have ever watched this stream, you know that is an aesthetic and millinery interest of mine. And I in this case, I was also drawn to the hats of Elsa Schiaparelli, who is a fashion design hero of mine. And she created a hat in 1930 called the Mad Cap. And it took fashion by storm. Everybody wanted it. There were actually a lot of people knocked it off, and I found some instructions in a women's magazine about how to sew your own version of the Schiaparelli Madcap. So I started with that as a starting point, but then, I made this is the third one that I've made. I made 2 mock-ups, also in this same exact fabric, to test my pattern, to see where I would want to adjust it. But also, this fabric is a spoonflower fabric. It's a new, relatively new textile that they've released called Performance Velvet. And I was familiar with their other velvet and velvet-like materials, the celosia velvet, which is really dense. It's like a upholstery weight fabric. And the minky, which is a knit ground, so it's stretchy and fuzzy. And those are both nice fabrics, but the qualities of the textile are such that I would not use either one of them for what I wanted this hat to be, which is not an evening hat, but not a super casual hat either. I wanted it to be a hat that I could wear in my daily life, or I could wear it to a special event and not seem out of place. I mean, seem kind of unusual because the style and the textile are unusual, but I wanted to see what this velvet was like. So I ordered the fill a yard option that they have, where you can get a yard worth of fabric, but then you can sort of tile several prints in it according to different orientations. So like it could be a stripe of four across the width of the fabric, so it's a yard long, and then a quarter of the width, however long the fabric is, which in the case of this Performance Velvet, the print width is 52 inches, which is important because when I get back to talking about the patterning of this, that 52 inches is important. I got a half a yard width-wise, a total of a yard, but half the width. So I have half of that 1 yard width in this print, which this is, I'm also making some of my phantom hats with this textile, which if you can see here, that's got a sort of a spooky chandelier printed on it. If you're familiar with Phantom of the Opera, there's an extremely dramatic moment surrounding the chandelier in the center of the Parisian Opera House. And if you're not familiar with it, I won't spoil it for you because it's serious. Actually, 35 years in, I mean, could you really not know what happens to the chandelier in Phantom of the Opera? I suppose it's possible. I won't spoil it, but it's significant. And in fact, when John and I were talking about this challenge, that was one of the things that came up. Oh, you could be inspired by a chandelier, either the structure of the chandelier or the imagery of the chandelier or crystals or whatever. And so anyway, I got a half of my yard of fabric printed with this spooky chandelier and a half with this all over Mucha, etc. opera posters. And so if you remember, the width, the print width in this spoonflower stuff is 52 inches. Half of that is 26 inches. And my head size measurement is typically, my hat size is 22. Like my head, if it's really tight, like I can pull on a 21 and a half, but it gives me a headache. So I like to buy hats that are 22 inch size. And when I first started patterning this thing, which, let me bring out, this is my first mock-up here. And it's pinned onto this hat because, or pinned onto this head because it's actually a little bit too small for even this styrofoam head. Because what I did in my first pattern was pattern it as if I was making a stitched hat for myself from, you know, a standard woven fabric and give it, you know, a bit of ease. And this velvet, the depth of the, the depth and the density of the pile is such that it it's really small. In the actual one that I'm wearing here, I wound up patterning it at cut my piece at 24 inches long, which gives me 2 inches of ease, and it fits snugly. It fits nicely. So just know, if you're going to take a page from this and decide to work with the performance velvet, that you need more ease than you think. Oh, I had pinned a little alteration into this. I want to show you what I did with this first one though, which is too tight. And the structure of this, the depth of the crown that your head fits into is shallower on this one. I'm sure you can tell when I compare it to the hat that I have on my head, that it is smaller, not just in the diameter of the head size opening, but that it's smaller in the capacity of the head, the amount of your head you can stick into it is more. Let me show you. I have this halfway put together one here to show you a step in the process, but I also I made a little paper mock-up of the pattern piece, which, if you can see those little lines drawn on it there in Sharpie, those are tucks, which, if you can see here, these tucks, there's a row of 5 tucks in this final iteration that come, okay, this is the pattern piece, right? And sorry, I need to have a drink of water here. I've been talking too much. All right. So recall that in this finished one, this measurement across here is 24 inches, and this measurement here is 12 inches, so that I could fold it into a triangle and all of it balances, right? That this is half this measurement. And those little tucks start at the first one is at the halfway point in the center of that piece. So this little piece of like origami patterning here is it shows you how you can figure this out based upon your head size measurement plus how much ease you think you need, which in my case, I added 2 inches of ease. I don't like my hats to fit tightly, and I wanted it to have some dimensionality in case, I don't know, I put my hair up or something. So I would trust you as a milliner, if you're going to make your own iteration of this hat, to know how much ease you need to add to your head size measurement in order to get this measurement here. But then all the rest of the orientation of this pattern is based upon how long that is. And that's just for this exact hat that I have made here. And of course you could alter it in other ways if you prefer. But the next step after I cut that piece out is to stitch these tucks into it, which, can you see them there? I love this this printed velvet because you get such a nice dimensional highlight where these tucks are, and that sort of brings me back to an element of this first one that I made, in which I was inspired by a hat that I had found in the costume storage at the theater where I work, PlayMakers Repertory Company. And there was a similar kind of hat that had the pleats or the tucks. The bulk of them was folded to the inside. So like if I turn this inside out, then the little ridges that you see here and here are inside the hat in this case. And what that does is the tucks themselves create an element of stability and structure to that part of the hat, and they reduce the length of one side. But when you orient that fold of the tuck to the inside, then it's very sleek and smooth on the outside, on the fashion fabric side. And when I did that, which this first one that I made only has 3 tucks in it, and I quickly realized when I put those tucks in it, I was like, whoa, this is really reducing the depth of the crown, which is undesirable, and it seems really small, which it turned out to be. But I also, in the case of this fabric, I didn't like that with the tucks to the inside, all it did was sort of pinch out an area of the graphic, and all of the visual interest that a tuck creates was to the inside, and it only manifests in the release at the edge. So this was a helpful mock-up to create for many reasons. I learned so much about what I wanted the finished hat to be like. And I was absolutely certain that the choices that I made the first time around, that I didn't care for things about them. And that's a matter of personal taste. You might totally love the shallowness. You might totally love the interior tucks. That's, matter of taste. But I decided, let me put this back on this little head here. Actually, let me not. I decided that I wanted it to be a little bigger, head size opening wise, and that I wanted it to be a little deeper, and that I wanted those tucks to the outside, which if you look at this one, this is the second one that I created. And I also was, I was still thinking that 3 tucks was the answer. So I stitched the 3 tucks into it. And this one, what I learned about it was that I wanted the crown of the hat to be even deeper, because what I was going from this whole time was that the piece was a quarter of the length of fabric that I had. And I thought, if I make it this deep, then I could get 4 hats out of it. I don't know why I cared about 4 hats, because no one's necessarily going to wear this besides me. But I guess for conservation of fabric. But what I realized was that I was being too scant in my width of the fabric that I wanted. Oh, Evelyn has joined over on Facebook Live. Hi, Evelyn. Thanks for coming. I thought that maybe in my second mock-up here, I thought that I still wanted 3 tucks, and I gave myself a little bit more opening in the head size. And I also made the depth of the hem in the head size opening here only maybe a 5/8 of an inch, a little bit more than a centimeter, I guess maybe a 1.5 centimeters, and put that on this head here. Well, I put it on my head too, but I realized a few things about it that I still wanted to change. And one was that my 3 tucks, which if you can see here, I went ahead and pinned a 4th tuck into it. And I decided when I did that what I actually wanted was 5 tucks and even more depth in the crown, which you can see the depth of the crown better on YouTube, but now you can see it on Facebook as well. Um, so I expanded the width of my piece to what it currently is on this one that I have cut out here, where you have this configuration of double the width as the or half the width as the depth of your crown. And I've gone ahead and stitched these marked pleats into this one that I'm making of the spooky chandelier fabric. And what happens next in sewing this hat together to get this finished version that's based on the Schiaparelli madcap, but slightly altered, is, so I have, here's the width of it. I'm putting the short sides together, and I will stitch these together. And then I'll open that seam. Oh, I need to pin this so you can see. I'll just quickly pin it. It doesn't need to hold together because I'm not really sewing it. I'm just demonstrating how this works. But then I fold it this way so that my seam, my center back seam, matches up with the center front, which is down the middle of that area where my tucks are. And then I stitch this along the top here. And then let me take this off so I can show you some details about it. So I have my seam up the center back here, which in this finished version of it, I top stitched it open to add a real oomph of stability. This performance velvet that I'm using from Spoonflower, which by the way, they did not sponsor this stream. I just am using it because I decided to use it. And I decided to talk about it because maybe you've wondered if it was any good or not too. But by opening up that seam allowance and top stitching the seam allowance on either side of the seam, it allows the hat to have a little bit more structure there, and it pushes the bulk of the crown up and forward. So that stable, I don't have a bone in there, but it's kind of like a bone channel on a bodice, pushes the fabric up and forward, right? And I have my 5 tucks along the front here. I've dropped them down a little. In both of these mock-ups, I did my tucks closer to that seam, and I realized they were too far back on the structure of the hat. And then, like if I completely open up the sort of bag of the hat and put it on, then now it's kind of like the Women's March hats, you know, it's like little kitty ears. And all respect to that, but that's not what I want this hat to be. So I used just my finger to push those back down inside of here, and it winds up making these little dimpled depressions in the hat so that when I put it on, it has this rounded quality to these areas here with the pleated structure and stability in the front there. And you know, in the wearing of this hat, like it is my taste to wear it slightly off center and cocked a little bit to the side. I think this would be a wonderful hat to wear on a day when I just don't feel like messing with my hair and I put my hair up inside of it. I think it would be awesome as kind of almost like a sophisticated head wrap, but stabilized. Like, you know, when you see these really, really beautiful ornate head wraps that you see women wearing on the street. And I always wonder whether they put a lot of effort into the tying of the wrap or whether it was completely stabilized, because I've seen a lot of structures. I follow a woman on Instagram who posts under the name Heads Gem Millinery, and she is based in Nigeria, I believe. And a lot of the content that she shares is the reworking of traditional African head wraps into sort of modern convenience styles that milliners have come up with to sort of expedite the amount of labor that goes into the wrapping of a really ornate wrap like that. Which there's something about the structure of this hat with the pleats and the dimples and such that reminds me of some of those really beautiful wraps that I've seen, whether they are the stabilized, modernized, streamlined ones or the traditional ones. There's something evocative of that, even though this is not a wrapped or turban style hat. Anyway, that is an overview of the way that I took that initial Schiaparelli hat, and or what I suspect what somebody thought it was in the 30s, because it was a period reference of like, here's how to make your own version of this hat, for anyone who couldn't afford designer hats, which, I mean, I read some stuff about how Schiaparelli was so angry that the hat style became so popular, but then so many other milliners and fashion brands and department store millinery sections knocked off the hat and made their own versions of it, or made mimicked versions of it, unbranded, generic versions of this madcap, that she had all of the remaining official ones destroyed, which kind of, I mean, I still love the things that she designed and the whole aesthetic of her brand, and even contemporarily, but that move really sort of rubbed me the wrong way, because I get that couture designers need to defend their aesthetic property and their artistic designs, and I guess anyone who was knocking it off and marketing it as like the Schiaparelli madcap and making money off of it, I get why that would make her mad, but I was disappointed, because what I followed was this sort of DIY women's magazine of like, you can't get your hands on this really expensive hat, but maybe you can make something really similar to it. Here's the directions. And I thought, that kind of copying is the most, I feel, the most complimentary. Somebody loves what you did enough that even though they can't afford it, they want something like it. Anyway, I've digressed there. I started with the instructions in that article. I need another drink. I started with the instruction in that article, and they wanted you, it is basically the same concept as this here, where you have a big rectangle and you stitch it into a tube, and then you stitch it across the top of the tube with the seam oriented at the center back. And this DIY one, though, had the depth of the crown was like ridiculously long. Like it was like when I made that version, it was like the Santa Claus hat version of the madcap. Like it was a long tube. And I was like, this is not right. So I cut mine down, and I cut mine down too much. But I think I've come to a depth of crown and a number of modifications to it that I'm happy with. I really love the asymmetricality. Well, I mean, it's a symmetrical hat, but I like to wear it with asymmetricality. And I think, you know, in the concept of this capsule collection for the Phantom 35 challenge, I love this all over print of the Nouveau Mucha opera posters. But in terms of like wearing it in my daily life, this is probably too busy for me. I'm not really a busy pattern type of gal, but I do think I bought this. I bought this chandelier, spooky chandelier fabric, with the intent of making a whole different sewn hat pattern from it. And I do still intend to do that. I have enough of it that I'm going to go with my original plan, and make the stitched hat that I planned to make with it. But as you can see, I've already started. I'm going to do a version of this Madcap knockoff, or not knockoff. It's different enough that I don't think she'd recognize it if she were still alive, which she's dead, so it doesn't really matter. But I'm going to make one of these out of this spooky chandelier stuff. And this is, if you look at it closely, it's still a fairly busy print, but it is enough, subdued enough to be something that I would totally love to wear in my actual daily life. And I can imagine this, like last winter was the pandemic, so last winter my daily hat was nothing. I didn't wear a hat the whole time because I spent it all sitting here in my house, in my studio. Usually in the winter, I have some hats that I wear on a regular rotation, and boiled wool berets are kind of my go-to, like, everyday hat. I'm going to work. I might be working with power tools, so I need just a hat that is utilitarian but also somewhat stylish. I have a feeling that this winter I'm going to be cranking out several of these, because this one will be in regular rotation, and maybe I'll feel like I want the busyness of this one that I have on my head right now. I think that I'm in the long-term scheme of things. Once it gets closer to the Phantom of the Opera anniversary, for which this capsule collection is designed, I plan to do a more formal video of all of I think there's going to be 3, maybe 4 hats of the designs that I create for that. I'm going to do a video that surveys all of them and talks about how they're made. But I think that this is really the key. It's like, once you know what this width is to go around your head comfortably in whatever material you're using. Maybe it's this, maybe it's a knit, maybe it's whatever. Boiled wool. Once you know that dimension, then anyone could create this pattern just by folding. Like, you don't even need to know math. Like, you could do this without even a tape measure, by just taking a piece of string and determining how much space you need in there for yourself. So I love these kinds of incredibly simple hats. Karen Tully has arrived. Hi, Karen. Good to see you. So many more people popping up on Facebook Live than on YouTube that I think I will continue to stream on both YouTube and Facebook. I think I get a better communal viewership, I guess. I I liked what I was getting when I was concurrently streaming on IGTV, but I just could not reconcile the the fact that the orientation of IGTV is strictly portrait and there was no turning it into landscape. And what I talk about needs a lot of space because, you know, you shrink up into a landscape and I'm talking about something. I find that too hard for me personally. But I love, even though it's a limited window on Facebook Live, I love that. Well, it may not be. I'll have to watch it when I'm not on my phone and see. But I think that I think I'm going to, my remaining streams will be on both platforms, which brings me to the fact that my stream is going to need to go on hiatus. I don't want to cancel it completely, but I start back to work at the theater where I work and the university where I teach. My first week is the first week of August. And I have a vague idea of how that's going to go and what the expectations are there for me. But I'm going to put my stream on temporary hiatus until I really go back there and see how it is. It may be possible for me to stream from my workplace studio. That might be fun. I feel like the leadership there are interested in that kind of visibility that comes from a stream. So I might be able to stream from that studio, and if so, that's going to be awesome. And if not, then I'll figure out what's feasible, whether it's, it's been really gratifying to watch my friend and colleague Denise Wallace-Spriggs, and she streams every Friday afternoon at 3 p.m. on Facebook Live, and it has been, oh, my phone is about to die. And I even brought this plug in here to plug it in, and I completely spaced doing it. Are you still there? Okay. My phone's power just completely pooped out on me. Even though I meant to plug it in before I started this stream, I completely spaced that part of the program, so whoops. Now I know. I will be doing my regular Thursday stream, though, for the remaining Thursdays in July, which is 2 more weeks. And then after that, we'll see. I don't know. I'll figure something out, whether it will be a weekend stream or a stream on site. It won't be weekly anymore, I don't think, because of professional responsibilities, but I'll let you know. And if you have a thought, if you have opinions on whether you think I should just cancel it or what works best, like if I were to move it to an evening or a weekend, it's, as I was starting to say before my phone died, it's been very helpful for me to see my friend and colleague Denise Wallace-Spriggs deal with how to modify her stream schedule in going back to work at the Huntington Theater where she works, and see what's going to work for her, which will not necessarily be the same thing that will work for me, but it gives me some ideas and options that I see how it will work, particularly with respect to who is capable of tuning in at what time and so forth. I think that with her being on a Friday afternoon here in the US, but that works out to being in the evening in the UK and parts of Western Europe, that meant that she was able to get like a weekend audience from folks that I don't necessarily get because people don't want to stay up super late on a Thursday night in Europe to watch a stream of somebody working on hats and piddling around in their studio and such. Maybe I would get not better, that's a value judgment. Maybe I would get a larger audience on a weekend once a month or something as we go back to having more in-person obligations and more entertainment options and being able to leave the house hopefully and so forth. So if you have a thought or an opinion on that, I would love to read it in the comments or the chat. And it's coming up on time for me to end this stream, which is good because I'm done talking about this hat project and the Phantom collection, which was sort of the goal of today. And I think that for my remaining 2 streams, it's funny that I've only come up with this idea here at the end, that pre-programming what the stream is going to be about. You know, I had left it nebulous, like, well, we'll see what it is because who knows what's going to come down the pike. But that if I have a specific topic, like in the case of today's stream, where we're just walking through, this is the pattern, here is how I altered the pattern over time, that's just more interesting than like, well, I worked on this and I worked some more on this and worked on that. I've tried to cover too many topics in past streams, I think, and it winds up being confusing instead of being like engaging. You're just watching the progress of one thing. There's some interesting shadows going on over here. I bought a new floodlight for the studio and I don't love it, I have to say. I like it better on YouTube, but I don't love it on Facebook Live, and I don't love it in general. So it may be something that I go give to someone at work or something. Live and learn. But we're coming to the end of this week's stream. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm excited to be streaming on 2 different platforms again, and reaching more folks. And I hope you learned something or found something valuable that you can take away from this survey of the alteration of the Schiaparelli Madcap into the Phantom 35 Madcap. And I'll see you next week in the stream that hopefully I'll be on both platforms again next week.